2, 1. Alrighty. So we are going to get started. This is our Reaching Home Advocacy Day webinar. Just a bit of housekeeping. Because this is a webinar, everybody's going to be muted, so we will be the only ones who are able to talk, but there is a little chat box function for you to ask any questions. It is the question mark up in the little chat box image at the top, and you can add your questions in at the bottom. We'll have somebody tracking our questions today, and there will be a link that will be sent out following today's presentation sometime this week that has a link to watch this recording, as well as we'll send out the slides so people can watch it after the fact or follow along today if you're here with us. So our presenters for today are going to be Bill Wells from Gallo and Robinson, Kylie Goslin from the Partnership for Strong Communities, and Sarah Fox from the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness, as well as myself, Danielle Hubley from the Partnership for Strong Communities. Our agenda today will be focused around an update on the 2020 proposed budget. The Reaching Home legislative priorities will be what we talk about next, followed by some logistics around the Advocacy Day this year and some strategies for advocacy in general. So to kick it off, we'll go to Bill.
Hi guys, good to be here with you today. I'm just going to quickly give you a budget update and give you a quick glance of what you're going to look at in the short session. So right now we are in the even year, which is a short session. It already started February 5th. We're going to be going till May 6th. This is known as the budget adjustment year. As you guys might know, last year was 2019. We were in the long session where they were actually setting the budget. That's why session moves longer. So we say that the short session is really the place where we're adjusting what happened after the long session is over and not necessarily creating big new ideas. It's more about kind of adjusting the ideas that have already been set in the year before. So here's a quick budget timeline for you. Last week, the governor put out his budget proposal, which I'll be going over a little bit in the next few slides. We're going to be reaching the appropriations hearing. Actually, tomorrow night is the Conservation and Development public hearing for the Department of Housing. And there'll also be corrections is going the same night too. The February 21st right now, we have marked as the time for the Health and Public hearing. That's DSS and DEMIS. However, the Democrats are talking about possibly coming in to vote on the toll bill. And if that happens next week, then the second week of the appropriations hearings will be thrown out of whack, and we will be sending you out more information on when that will happen. But right now, you can pencil in Friday, February 21st for the Health and Public hearing. And then to be determined, February or March, the Finance Committee is going to do a public hearing on bonding for those of you that are interested in the bonding agenda. April 2nd, the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee has to come up with the revenue. They have to put out their final idea for the revenue. And then on April 3rd, the Appropriations Committee has to come out with their idea on what we should be doing about spending. And then between April 3rd and May 6th, the legislature is going to get together. They're going to discuss how much revenue and how much money they want to spend goes together. And by May 6th, they're going to come up with a budget, hopefully sooner than May 6th, but will probably be that week. The budget landscape right now for fiscal year 2020, right now we're in a projected deficit of about 58.8 million. It's a smaller deficit than deficits past, but a one that we will be tracking to make sure that that it doesn't get any bigger. And then at the end of fiscal year 2021, we're supposed to be going into a surplus. Originally, it was supposed to be 166.2, but the Governor Lamont in his new budget put out a revised surplus of about 153.7. Our current Department of Housing funding, we have the Housing and Homeless Services original appropriation was 85.7. The governor's budget has knocked it down to 84.6. That's a roughly $1.1 million drop due to the lapse. And then we have homeless youth has had no change to this budget. So it's exactly the same as they passed in committee last year. For mental health and addiction services funding, you're going to see some of these lines have increases. These increases are due to the passage of the minimum wage bill last year. Nonprofit providers have asked for increases in their budgets to go along with that minimum wage increase. So you see an increase in the housing and support services line, you see an increase in the grants for mental health services line, and you see an increase in the grants for substance abuse services line. Community investment account supports the work of our CANs. There is no budget line item for CIA funds. This is called back of the budget. But luckily this year, the governor did not put any proposal to sweep the CIA funds in the budget. So we haven't seen any sweeps, but we will still be on top of it throughout the session to make sure there are no sweeps in the final budget in May. The funds from the CIA account are raised through a $40 recording fee on all land transactions. And these funds go to Department of Housing and support our coordinated system and homelessness. So this is a real kind of in brief overview of what we're going to be looking at for a while. So we have the public hearings, which we're entering starting tomorrow. Advocates, you guys submit testimony for hearings and explain the importance, and you maintain the momentum going into the public hearings. After these appropriations public hearings for the next 2 weeks, they break up into the subcommittees, and these subcommittees get back together with the departments for kind of like a follow-up Q&A on some questions that were raised at the public hearing. So if there was a cut here, they'll ask the department to come in with more details on why that cut was made. And this is the place where we try to influence these members to push for the funding that we're asking for. There will be some committee deliberation. The Appropriations Committee will deliberate before their deadline on what the subcommittees come out with. So once the reports are finalized for all the subcommittees, they'll make sure it all lines up together and make sure all the subcommittees are passing a balanced budget together. And then once Approps passes their spending package and finance package passes the revenue package, the governor, the leadership of the appropriations chairs, and the finance and revenue bonding committee meet up together, and they kind of hammer out the budget with OPM and get to us to a final place where they can release a budget on the last week of May. I mean, the first week of May this year. Regarding the state budget, the governor's budget for the adjustment budget includes no broad-based tax rate increases, but it does cancel or slow previously pledged tax cuts that affect Connecticut businesses. As a reminder to everyone here, there are constituencies for every pledged tax cut that Governor Lamont has proposed to cancel or slow. So if there's something that they're trying to save some money on by slowing it down, this constituency will be in the building saying, no, we were promised a tax cut and we want that tax cut. And therefore, that's what creates our kind of push and pull in the legislature on whether or not we have enough money to pay for everything, because there's folks who want these tax cuts too. His budget proposal largely held harmless most human services programs. Many line items were flat funded. Some were increased slightly to provide assistance to providers due to the passage of minimum wage last year. As we probably noted in the past, Governor Lamont is still very reluctant to touch any of the rainy day fund, which now sits at an historically high for Connecticut, $2.5 billion. Governor and the legislature will have to cut spending, raise revenue, or will have to do a combination of both options. No matter what, come May 6th, when they gavel out, the budget must be balanced or they cannot leave.
Great. So now we're going to move over to Kylie to talk us through some of the Reaching Home legislative priorities for the 2020 session.
Hi, everyone. So as many of you know, since you're part of Reaching Home, this is a collaboration of more than 120 organizations across the state, all working to support all of our efforts to end homelessness in Connecticut. We all work off of one legislative agenda throughout the course of the year, and this legislative agenda is put through the Reaching Home campaign process. So the legislative priorities that I'm about to go through came from our different various work groups and were proposed up through and voted by our coordinating committee. So without further ado, let's move on. The legislative priorities remain the same. Just to note that we've adjusted our messaging materials in response to mostly the governor's budget that has recently come out last week. So it may be a little different than what you last heard, but for the most part, it is the same. So the first item of business to talk about with folks in Europe at the legislature is protecting the items that are already in place. So this first item is the Department of Housing and Homelessness Services line. This is currently at 85.8 million, as Bill noted. The governor this year did propose making an adjustment to that to reduce it by a little over $1 million, and that was to offset or account for lapse funding that's associated with the Money Follows the Person program that's administered through DSS. So what we're asking is to keep it at that 85.8 million, so that ideally those funds can be repurposed for diversion and other housing resources. The homeless youth line was also at 2.3 last year and is still there in the governor's budget at 2.3, and then the same thing with the DMIS housing supports and services line item at 23 million. We are making some new asks this year. So as Bill noted, this is a short session, but however, we feel that it's important, and the coordinating committee and many of you that are part of the campaign felt it was important to really project the true need and identify some new asks this year. And whether or not we get those new asks, I think it's important to note that the conversations you have with legislators are critical in explaining the reasoning behind these asks. And even if we don't get them this year, they really lay the groundwork for future years. So it's critical that we're still talking about this. So this item here is a dedicated funding for the coordinated access networks. Last year, we did pursue this, and the governor did put a line item for cans in. However, it didn't end up making it through at the end due to the threat of potentially CIA going away. As Bill mentioned, CIA is the primary source by which cans have been funded for a long time. However, that CIA funding is subject to the real estate taxes that go into it, so it does fluctuate, and there are other sources that get funding from CIA as well. So really, we all feel, as you all know, that cans are so critical to our system, to helping to get folks out of homelessness quickly, and also helping to divert folks. This is really important funding. We're asking for 2.3 million annually in a specific line item under DOH's Housing and Homelessness Services. This is a great place for you to talk about the importance of 211, which is also funded by this, and the work that you either do as a CAN or are involved with your CAN. Then we've got 4 new specific targeted investments. And just so you know, and Sarah will touch on this too, it's usually useful to have a couple that you're really targeting and prioritizing. Most importantly, I've been spending time talking with legislators about cans, and this first item, which is funding for a housing stabilization fund. And this is really ideally flexible funding that could be used to help divert folks at the front door and quickly resolve episodes of potential homelessness. This could be used to pay for things like rental arrearages or car repair or utilities that are owed. Oftentimes, as you all know, it's a small amount of money that can prevent somebody from entering the shelter system and having to identify new housing on the back end, which is a much more costly endeavor and traumatic for those individuals. So this funding is targeted specifically to individuals and youth, and that's in part because the state recently received from grant funding for families through the Bezos Fund, and we're trying to round out this pool and hopefully build it over time. So again, a good chance for you to talk to legislators about diversion and how that happens, as well as helping folks exit quickly out the back door of our system. And we've got a couple items here for rental assistance and services for highly vulnerable people. This is just additional resources, again, for housing, and then the wraparound services that go with that. This is a great chance to talk about supportive housing and the role that it's played in Connecticut's success so far in reducing its homeless population. And then finally, there's an ask for some additional resources related to outreach. So as many of you know, our outreach abilities are limited, and we have a handful of part-time folks really doing this really, really important work, and we know that we have more individuals and families out there that just haven't been connected to our system. And so this would provide a boost to outreach resources so that we can do more of that and better identify individuals. Finally, we have an item here for affordable housing. This is, as you know, funding for Flex Fund and our State Housing Trust Fund. For those of you who were following last year, the governor proposed $0 in his budget for affordable housing bonding. We're now, as you see in this first bullet, he's proposing $205 million, which is obviously a much better place to be than zero. Our budget asks for 150 per year for a total of 300 over the biennium, and we're still going to ask for that. As you all know, the need for affordable housing is real, and it's critical to both our ability to prevent and end homelessness. One point that I found particularly helpful in talking about this with legislators is the fact that we have nearly 5,000 publicly supported rental units that are set to have their affordability restrictions expire in the next 5 years, and that will continue over the next 20 years increasingly. So this isn't just about creating new units. This is about preserving existing units. And additionally, with that last bullet, as many of you know, a lot of our public housing units are in need of immediate investment. A lot of times those projects, those rehab projects and those preservation projects involve not only federal dollars, but require state dollars. And so these bonding funds are critical to create new housing, whether that be at transit or wherever, but also to support the units we already have so that we don't see a decrease in our overall affordable housing stock over the coming years. And finally, we have, one more bill on removing barriers for youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. So for those of you who know, our youth and young adults work group has been talking about some of these topics. We're lucky enough to have some friends from Youth Action Hub that are part of our campaign work, and some of these were flagged by those folks as well as others that work in the youth space. So those of you who are in that area know that access to identity documents like birth certificates and other state issued IDs can be a significant hurdle for youth experiencing homelessness in terms of accessing employment or participating in school activities. So we have some new bill language that we'll be sharing with you soon on this in bill number so that you can talk about this with legislators in a more detailed way. But in essence, that's what it does. It allows you to access those documents with fee waivers and more streamlined process.
So now let's get into a little bit of the logistics for Advocacy Day itself. So based on some of the successes and some of the feedback that we've had from past Advocacy Day events, the format is going to look a little bit different this year than it has in past years. So given that this is a short session, there's going to be less time in the year to weigh in on proposed policy changes. So that's just something we're taking into consideration and thinking through a new strategy. As well, we're looking to have a more targeted approach for communities to be directly connected with their legislative leaders, talking about issues that are happening during session, that are happening in your communities, to have those conversations directly with legislators who can change things in those areas. And the goal of this is really to support local leaders and advocates for advocating for what they need within their community, but also within this statewide context. As Kylie mentioned before, we have the shared agenda, but that doesn't mean that there's not particular needs for different communities. So being able to have that conversation and build that relationship with your legislators yourselves is what we're hoping for here. In terms of prepping for Advocacy Days, we want to identify CAN advocacy leaders within each CAN region, at least 1 to 2 that we can be working with to help coordinate and collaborate on these different, on this day. So once those CAN leads are identified, Sarah Fox from CCH and Danielle, myself from the partnership, will be working with you to set meetings. Likely we'll send out the emails of all the legislators and their phone numbers so that you can connect with them, and then we will help on the back end to make sure that those meetings are scheduled and that we have, to my third point, making sure that all those meetings that we schedule are covered by community members from your CAN region.
So one of the key things, and this is Sarah just jumping in, so in years previous, we've all sort of convened in room 2600 at the Legislative Office Building, and we've had presentations for legislators. And as many of you know, this means that some legislators attended for a few minutes, but every legislator was invited. When Danielle was saying targeted, what we mean is that targeted means that we're going to be reaching out to legislators, many of whom have not participated for whatever reason in the past, but are key legislators who we need to have conversations with today and within this session to make sure that they understand our work and they're able to advocate for us throughout the appropriations process. So that's just, so these will be much more in-office meetings with legislators versus the presentation that we've done on every year for the past 5 years.
Thank you. Yeah. And then the last thing is really just preparing any materials that you want to have to bring. So we'll have some shared materials, but as well, you know, if you have particular regional information you would like to share with them, this is a good time to bring that material with you. So here is the schedule for this new format. We're going to be meeting for the day of Wednesday, March 11th. We'll kick off in the morning. We'll start here at the Lyceum so that we can run through any messaging, conversations, make sure you know where you're going throughout the day. And then we'll all head over to the Legislative Office Building. Once we get there, we're going to set up for a press conference at the LOB. This will be in hearing room 1B. And we'll have a 30-minute press conference with opportunities for Q&A from reporters. That will kick off the start of the meetings. And to my last bullet, the meetings will follow as scheduled. So we'll make sure that you know where you're going, who's attending where, and make sure you're in the places that you need to be. Now I'll kick it over to Sarah.
Okay, so when you're prepping for Advocacy Day, there's a few key things that we just need you to think about. And one, I want you to know that you're going to be prepared, and there will be fact sheets, and there's going to be the data that you need to bring into your meetings. Danielle and I will work closely with you just to make sure that you're as well prepared and that all the stakeholders that you're bringing with you have the tools that you need to be successful. So I just wanted to, to walk you through a few things. And I don't have to elaborate on everything, but I think the key thing for legislators to understand is we are making progress. And our progress, it doesn't mean that we have made an end to homelessness, but it means that we have taken great strides to reduce homelessness. But we have more to go. And we still have people who are homeless and on our streets every single day. And so we need more investments and more resources to get our job done and to ensure that homelessness is rare, brief, and one time for every individual, youth, and family across the state. So again, we want to help our key legislators understand that, this is a solvable problem. Every day that we house someone, we're ending their period of homelessness, and we're making their community stronger. Our state, the investments that they've made to date are working. And this is something that's really key. Again, if you look at states, just the states that are bordering Connecticut, they're seeing increases in homelessness and across the nation as well. We continually, every single day, are reducing our numbers, and our system is coordinated in a way that makes it very effective. Every resource that we have in this state is well used, and we know that on the ground in your community, when you have a dollar, that dollar is going way farther than it could if we didn't have this coordinated system. So that's just some core messaging. And we'll have, as in the past, fact sheets for you to provide your legislators that just sort of help to enumerate the key points that you want to be making during your meeting, but also help to sort of draw the picture and frame out the message of what it means to ensure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring in Connecticut. So for advocacy strategies, again, this is going to be a different year and it's going to have a different feel. After the press conference takes place, there's going to be meetings that are scheduled with legislators all across the Legislative Office Building. So for this, you really want to sort of, and it's a little bit lower, but you want to create a team to go with you. And you might want several teams in your can. As Danielle said earlier, we're going to have can leads, but sort of figure out who should go to which meetings and what those meetings will look like. Choose 1 or 2 policy priorities to be discussed. For some, when you're scheduling and when you're working with Danielle and I, you're going to be able to have the opportunity to have a long meeting with a legislator. And for those meetings, you want to plan for introductions, you want to have roles, you want to highlight an agenda, and you want to close it out with a request for a commitment and an ask from that legislator. But in other instances, you may just be able to sort of catch a legislator when they are running down the hall. And in those moments, it's when you have to craft an elevator speech and you have to be fast on your feet and give them a few key points and follow up with those legislators. When you're in meetings with legislators and every time you're talking to them, you want to say thank you for the investments that they've made, but you also want to do a little bit of homework and know exactly what they've done in your coordinated access network, in your community, in their district to make an impact in the work that's being done to end homelessness. And this varies. And there are some legislators who have been stalwart champions of our work, and there are some who are just beginning to dip their toe in. So knowing that and being supportive and being there to help them is really important. Be strategic again, and the Partnership for Strong Communities and CCH will be there to help you understand sort of the target legislators that we are working to reach out to that day. In the past, as I said earlier, we've reached out to all legislators. This is going to be much more targeted, and it's going to be a much more easier lift for you all. But you want to be strategic in who your meetings are with, and you also want to be strategic about who participates in your meeting. So think about the community members who perhaps are not traditional. You want to have constituents from the legislator's district in on that meeting as well. That is very, very important. And you want to think about, perhaps, as we have done in years past, inviting key people from hospitals, from libraries, from community providers who are working across your coordinated access network and in your community every day. And then lastly, you're going to be having conversations with legislators. They may ask you things that you don't know the answer to. It's okay to say you don't know. It's also a perfect time to follow up with legislators and to reach back out to them and build a relationship with them that will be valuable for years to come. And I just, I covered a lot of what is on this slide. But again, so know who in your meetings is a constituent of the legislator. And also, most importantly, when you're planning for Advocacy Day, think about reaching out to your community and really recruiting individuals who have experienced homelessness to be the voice to this issue on that day. And when you work with individuals experiencing homelessness, help walk them through the fact sheets and the materials that we provide you. Have conversations about what the materials mean, and really, have conversations about how their lives have been impacted either by housing or by the program in your area, because those are the conversations that legislators remember, they hold on to, and they will bring to the floor if necessary if they're fighting for something that they're going to champion as one of our issues. As I said earlier, we're going to provide you with materials, you're going to have fact sheets, you're going to have talking points, you're going to have everything you need to be successful, including the legislative contact information. We will again be doing everything to make this as easy and as less onerous on you as possible. And we're here to help. So if you have other strategies that you want to employ, or if you have questions that need to be answered, both Danielle and I are here for you every day to make this easy and as light as lift as possible. And just, as we move forward throughout this short session, we just want to continue to drive home the importance of engaging in your community and building these relationships locally. The work that you do in your community and those relationships are invaluable, and they help legislators to understand our efforts to end homelessness better than we possibly can do sometimes at the state level. Over the course of the session, you're going to be receiving action alerts. It's always great if you can forward those onto your boards, if you can forward them on to other champions, and for you to respond to action alerts. There was an action alert just this past week asking you all to come out to hearings. or to submit testimony. If you haven't done so yet, consider testifying tomorrow or during the DMIS or DSS hearings that will most likely take place on the 21st. Your voice is necessary and it's important, and we couldn't do this without you. So I just want to thank you, but think about how you can engage in your local community and how we can assist.
So now we'll take a few minutes to answer any questions, if any have come up so far. Otherwise, if you haven't posed a question but would like to, now is the time to type it into the chat box. I'll leave it. It seems that there are no questions immediately for this portion. So if you have questions after watching this recording, or you have questions that come up over the course of the legislative session, feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer any questions you have. I'll throw up mine and Sarah's contact information. You can reach out to us directly. Feel free to call as well. We're happy to answer whatever questions you have. We are excited to engage you in this legislative session. And on that note, I'll thank everybody for their time. We have reached the end of our webinar. Again, a recording will be sent out with all of the materials and the slides and this meeting recording.
We got one question.
Oh, we did get one question.
Just now. It was asked what the deadline to submit testimony is.
If you are talking about for tomorrow's hearing, so the hearing that'll be on the 11th, the hearing starts at 5 p.m. We will need to submit testimony to the LOB by noon tomorrow. So if you would like to submit written testimony, you can do that by 12 p.m. tomorrow. If you are planning to testify in person, you still have until noon tomorrow to submit written testimony, but I do need to know today, by close of business, 5 p.m. today, if you are planning to testify, so that we can make sure we draw a number for you to actually present your testimony tomorrow. For the DMIS hearing, an action alert will be coming out sometime in the next week or so with more instructions to follow up on, so you'll have some more time for that one. Thank you. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.